I have a $20 million check to deposit.
20 million? From you? Don't make me laugh.
It's a valid cashier's check.
Shut your mouth. I can smell the fraud on you. Can you check again? Don't tell me what I should do.
Karen ripped the check down the middle. The crack echoed through the lobby.
You filthy rats crawl in here every week with your scams. Disgusting.
Miles Carter didn't flinch. Fragments clung to his worn flannel. A customer laughed. Another recorded.
Drag this trash out of my bank.
He shoved Miles toward the glass doors. Karen turned away, still laughing. She had no idea who the man she had just called trash actually was. To understand how this moment happened, we need to go back 6 hours. 6 hours before Karen Whitfield tore up that check, Miles Carter was sitting on the back porch of a 3-bedroom house in Decatur, Georgia. The paint was peeling near the gutters. The lawn needed mowing. A rusted swing set leaned sideways in the backyard, left behind by the previous owner 15 years ago. Miles sipped black coffee from a chipped mug. He wore the same flannel shirt he'd wear to the bank later that morning. Gray joggers, old running shoes with the soles worn flat. No watch, no ring. Nothing that said the man holding that mug controlled $4.2 billion in assets. Miles Carter was the founder and sole owner of Ascend Capital Partners, one of the largest black-owned investment firms on the East Coast. He had started it 23 years ago with a $50,000 loan from his grandmother, a woman who cleaned office buildings in downtown Atlanta for 31 years. She told him one thing before she signed the paperwork. "Money is loud, Miles. You stay quiet." He kept that promise. He drove a 2011 Ford Explorer with a crack in the windshield. He cut his own grass. He ate lunch at the same diner on Ponce de Leon Avenue 3 times a week. A turkey club, no mayo, sweet tea. The waitress called him baby and never once asked what he did for a living. He liked that. But quiet didn't mean passive. Over 2 decades, Ascend Capital had funded housing projects, tech startups, and community health clinics across the Southeast. Miles had written checks that built schools. He had financed grocery stores in food deserts where no chain would go. And 8 years ago, he had personally invested $30 million to open a new branch of Heritage First Bank in a neighborhood that every other bank had abandoned. That branch sat on Campbellton Road in southwest Atlanta. The area had been redlined for decades. No major bank wanted the risk. No corporation wanted the optics of failure. But Miles saw something different. He saw 12,000 families who cashed their paychecks at liquor stores because no one had ever given them a better option. So he built one. Heritage First opened on a Saturday morning in March. Miles stood in the back row during the ribbon cutting. He didn't give a speech. He didn't shake hands with the mayor. He watched from behind a column as a grandmother opened her first savings account at age 67, and that was enough. The branch grew. Within 3 years, it served over 9,000 customers. It offered free financial literacy classes on Tuesday nights. It partnered with local churches to help families avoid predatory lending. It became exactly what Miles had designed it to be, a lifeline. He never visited as an owner, never introduced himself to the staff. The board of Heritage First knew his name, of course. The CEO knew. The CFO, Raymond Bennett, was one of his oldest friends. But the people on the ground, the tellers, the managers, the security guards, they had no idea who funded their paychecks. Miles preferred it that way. This morning, he had a specific reason to visit. Ascend Capital was donating $20 million to a new community initiative, a program to provide zero-interest microloans to black-owned small businesses in underserved zip codes. The check needed to be deposited at the originating branch. His lawyers wanted a paper trail. His accountants wanted a timestamp. Miles wanted to see the place one more time. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, set it upside down on the dish rack next to a single plate and a single fork. The house was quiet. It had been quiet for 4 years, since his wife Eleanor passed from pancreatic cancer. Her reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. He never moved them. Miles grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. The check was folded once, tucked inside the breast pocket of his flannel. $20 million, pressed flat against his chest like a grocery receipt. He backed the Explorer out of the driveway. The engine rattled at the stop sign. A neighbor waved. Miles waved back. 45 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of Heritage First Bank on Campbellton Road. He sat in the car for a moment, looking at the building through the cracked windshield. The sign above the entrance read, Heritage First, Empowering Communities. He had paid for that sign. He walked through the front doors. No one looked up. The lobby of Heritage First was half full. A young mother bounced a toddler on her hip near the deposit window. An elderly man in a brown suit studied his account statement through reading glasses. Two college-aged kids sat in the waiting area scrolling their phones, probably there for a student loan consultation. Soft jazz played from a speaker mounted near the ceiling. The air smelled like carpet cleaner and printer toner. Miles walked to the back of the line. 3 people ahead of him. He folded his hands in front of his waist and waited the way he always waited. Still, patient, invisible. The teller at window 2 was a young woman named Brittany Walsh. 24 years old, dirty blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, French tip nails tapping against the counter between customers. She processed the elderly man's transaction without looking at his face. She waved the young mother forward and asked about the baby's name with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Efficient, practiced, hollow. When Miles reached the window, Brittany's smile dropped 3 degrees. She scanned him, the flannel, the joggers, the shoes with no brand logo. Her eyes moved from his chest to his hands. No briefcase, no portfolio. Just a man who looked like he'd wandered in from a bus stop. "Can I help you?" The warmth was gone. "Good morning." Miles reached into his breast pocket and unfolded the check. He slid it across the counter. "I'd like to deposit this, please." Brittany picked it up. Her eyes hit the amount line and her fingers stopped moving. $20 million. She looked at the check. She looked at Miles. She looked at the check again. "Hold on." She didn't explain. She placed the check flat on the counter, face down, and picked up the desk phone. She pressed a 3-digit extension. "Karen? Yeah, I need you out here. Now." Miles heard the click of heels before he saw her. Karen Whitfield came around the corner from the manager's office, like a woman who owned the building. Navy blazer, cream blouse, pearl earrings. Her chin was slightly elevated, the way people carry themselves when they've mistaken authority for identity. She was 38 years old, had managed this branch for 3 years, and had never once questioned why it existed. It was hers. That's all she needed to know. Brittany handed her the check without a word. Karen looked at it. Then she looked at Miles. Something shifted behind her eyes. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't caution. It was contempt. The kind that comes preloaded, already aimed before a word is spoken. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was flat. "It's a cashier's check drawn on Ascend Capital Partners," Miles said. "I'd like to deposit it into the community fund account." Ascend Capital. Karen repeated the name like she was tasting something spoiled. "And your relationship to this company?" "I'm the account holder." Karen tilted her head. Her lips pressed together. She held the check up to the fluorescent light as if she could see the fraud glowing through the paper. "Sir, do you have any idea how many people walk in here every month trying to deposit fake checks?" "This isn't a fake check. I'll be the judge of that." She lowered it. "ID. 2 forms, and I'll need proof of your relationship to this account." Miles reached into his back pocket and produced his driver's license. He set it on the counter. "I can also provide the account routing information if you—" "I didn't ask for routing information. I asked for proof." She picked up his license, studied it for 4 seconds, then set it down like it was dirty. "This doesn't prove anything. Anyone can have a license." The elderly man in the brown suit had turned around in his chair. The young mother shifted her toddler to the other hip, watching. One of the college kids lowered his phone, sensing something. "Ma'am, if you call the issuing bank, they'll verify." "Don't tell me how to do my job." Karen's voice rose just enough for the lobby to hear. She wanted them to hear. "I've been in banking for 15 years. I know what a fraudulent instrument looks like. And this," She held the check between two fingers like a tissue. This is exactly that. It's not. It is. And I'm not going to let some guy walk in off the street and compromise my branch. Miles noticed the word. My branch. He stayed quiet. His hands stayed at his sides. His breathing stayed even. He had learned a long time ago that silence in a room full of noise was its own kind of power. But silence also meant he had to stand there while Karen Whitfield performed. And she was performing. She turned to Brittany. Pull up any account under this name. If there's nothing in our system, we're done here. Brittany typed, clicked, scrolled, her brow furrowed. There's no personal account under Miles Carter. Karen smiled. Not a kind smile. The smile of someone who has just confirmed what they already believed. No account. No history. No relationship to this bank. She fanned the check in the air. And somehow, $20 million. A man in a polo shirt near the door chuckled. A woman next to him shook her head. Ma'am, I can explain. You can explain to the police. Karen reached for the desk phone. I'm calling them right now. That's not necessary. If you'll just... Security! Karen's voice hit the ceiling. Derek, the security guard, was already moving. 6'2", wide shoulders, crew cut. He had been leaning against the wall by the entrance, arms crossed. Now he was crossing the lobby in 4 long strides. This man is attempting to deposit a fraudulent check, Karen said, her voice loud enough for every ear in the building. Escort him out. Ma'am, I came here to make a legitimate deposit. You came here to steal, Karen leaned forward. And I don't care what story you've rehearsed. I've seen 100 of you. Same clothes, same lies, same pathetic little hustle. She picked up the check with both hands, and she tore it, right down the center. The sound was sharp, final, like a door slamming on a conversation that was never allowed to happen. She tore it again, 4 pieces. She let them fall to the counter, then swept them off with the back of her hand. They drifted to the floor near Miles's worn shoes. Now get out of my bank! Derek grabbed Miles by the upper arm. His grip was firm, practiced. Miles didn't resist. He looked down at the torn pieces of the check, $20 million in confetti on a marble floor, and then looked at Karen. She was already turning away, adjusting her pearl earring, resettling into the version of herself she liked best. Mrs. Gloria Hayes, 71 years old, sitting in the 3rd chair of the waiting area, stood up. She had been watching everything. Her purse was clutched against her chest. Her voice was thin but steady. That wasn't right. You didn't even try to verify it. Karen glanced over her shoulder. Ma'am, sit down. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us. Sit down. Mrs. Hayes sat. Not because she agreed, because she was 71, and she knew what happens to old black women who argue in places like this. Derek walked Miles to the door, pushed it open with his free hand, guided Miles through it with the other. The glass door closed behind them with a soft hiss. Miles stood on the sidewalk. The Georgia sun hit his face. A bird sang from the power line above the parking lot. His Explorer sat 3 rows back, the cracked windshield catching the light. He reached into his pocket. His phone was still there. So was his calm. He had been disrespected before. He had been underestimated his entire career. But no one had ever torn up his money in front of his face and laughed about it. He dialed 1 number. Raymond Bennett picked up on the 2nd ring. Ray, it's Miles. What's going on? You sound... I'm at the Campbellton branch. The manager just tore up the $20 million check and had security throw me out. Silence. She did what? You heard me. Raymond exhaled. When he spoke again, his voice was made of iron. Don't move. I'm calling Victor. We'll be there in 2 hours. Miles hung up. He leaned against the hood of his Explorer. The metal was warm from the sun. Inside the bank, Karen Whitfield was telling Brittany to sweep up the check fragments. She was laughing about it. She told Derek he did a good job. She straightened the pens on her desk and checked her lipstick in the reflection of her computer screen. She had no idea what was coming. Miles didn't leave the parking lot. He sat in the Explorer with the engine off. The windows were down. He could hear the traffic on Campbellton Road. Delivery trucks, a city bus hissing to a stop, someone's car stereo thudding bass through the intersection. Normal sounds. A normal Tuesday morning for everyone except him. He looked at his hands. Steady. No tremor. No rage. Just the quiet hum of a man who had spent 52 years learning when to move and when to wait. His phone buzzed. Raymond Bennett. Victor's in. He's pulling 2 attorneys from legal. We'll be at the branch by noon. I'll be here. Miles. Raymond paused. The kind of pause that carries weight. What exactly did she say to you? Miles told him. All of it. The questions. The tone. The way she held his license like it was contaminated. The way she said, "my branch." The way she tore the check and let the pieces fall to the floor while a guard gripped his arm. Raymond was quiet for a long time. Miles could hear him breathing through the phone. She said, 100 of you? Her words. That's not procedure, Miles. That's not even close to procedure. I know. And she tore the check, a certified cashier's check, in front of customers. In front of about 15 people. One of them was recording. Another pause. Longer this time. We're going to fix this. All of it. Don't go anywhere. Miles hung up. He tilted the seat back 2 inches and closed his eyes. Not to sleep. To think. He was calculating. Not revenge. He didn't think in those terms. He was calculating responsibility. He had built this branch to serve people who looked like him. People like Mrs. Hayes. People like the young mother holding her baby while watching a man get dragged out for trying to give money away. The person running this place was using it to humiliate the very community it was designed to protect. That wasn't a management failure. That was a betrayal of everything he had built. Inside the bank, Karen Whitfield was having the best morning of her career. At least, that's how she told it. She stood behind the teller line, recounting the story to Brittany and a loan officer named Todd Emerson. She mimicked Miles's voice, deepening it, slowing it down, making his calm sound like stupidity. She made his patience sound like guilt. He just stood there, she said, pressing her hand to her chest in mock shock. Like he actually believed I was going to deposit a $20 million check from a man in sweatpants. Todd laughed. Brittany smiled, but her smile was tight. Something about the interaction had left a splinter in her chest that she couldn't name yet. She kept seeing the pieces of paper floating to the floor. She kept hearing Mrs. Hayes's voice. That wasn't right. Should we file a report or something? Brittany asked. For what? I handled it. He's gone. That's the report. But what if the check was real? Karen looked at her the way a teacher looks at a student who has just asked the wrong question. Brittany, sweetie, men who carry $20 million checks don't dress like that. They don't drive cars like that. They don't look like that. Use your head. Brittany went back to her window. She wiped the counter with a paper towel she didn't need. Karen walked to her office. She closed the door halfway, sat in her leather chair, and opened Instagram. She posted a vague story. Some days you just have to protect your space. #BankLife. #not today. 3 colleagues liked it within a minute. She didn't know that 30 feet away, in the lobby she had just cleared, the story was already escaping her control. Real talk. What kills me isn't just Karen. It's the whole lobby. Watching, recording, laughing. Nobody spoke up, except one 71-year-old woman, and they shut her down too. That's the part that stays with me. The teenager who had recorded the confrontation, a 19-year-old named Jamal Price, was sitting in his car in the parking lot, replaying the footage on his phone. He had caught everything. Karen's voice rising, the sharp crack of the check tearing, Derek's hand closing around Miles's upper arm, the pieces falling. Mrs. Hayes standing up and being told to sit down. Jamal uploaded it to Twitter with a caption. Bank manager rips up black man's $20 million check and laughs in his face. Calls security. Watch till the end. The The video was 43 seconds long. Within 30 minutes, it had 6,000 retweets. By 10 a.m., it had crossed to Instagram and TikTok. Someone stitched it with a reaction video. Someone else added a text overlay. This is what banking while black looks like. A local news account in Atlanta shared it with a single question mark emoji. A civil rights attorney in Houston quote tweeted it. This is textbook discrimination under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Who is this manager? By 11 a.m., the video had passed 200,000 views. Comments poured in from across the country. Some were angry. Some were disgusted. Some tagged Heritage First Bank's corporate account. Some tagged the NAACP. Some tagged the Georgia Attorney General's office. A state senator from Fulton County reposted it with the words, "This is why we fight." Karen Whitfield had no idea. She was in her office eating a yogurt parfait and reviewing next week's staffing schedule. Her phone was on silent. Her email was minimized. The world was already burning down around her name, and she was adjusting font sizes on a spreadsheet. Mrs. Gloria Hayes had gone home. She lived 4 blocks from the bank, in a yellow house with a chain-link fence and a rose bush she had planted the year her husband died. She sat at her kitchen table with her hands folded, staring at the sugar bowl. She couldn't stop thinking about the man in the flannel shirt, the way he hadn't raised his voice, the way he'd looked at Karen, not with anger but with something heavier, recognition, like he'd seen this before and had stopped being surprised by it a long time ago. She picked up her phone and called her daughter. "Something happened at the bank today," she said. "Something that wasn't right." Back at Heritage First, Brittany knew. She had seen the video on her own feed during her break. Her stomach dropped. She recognized the lobby. She recognized her own voice calling Karen's extension. She recognized the back of her own ponytail at the edge of the frame. She walked to Karen's office and knocked. "What?" "Karen, there's a video going around. From this morning." "A video of what?" "Of the man, the check, everything." Karen set down her spoon. She picked up her phone. She scrolled. She found the video in 4 seconds. It was everywhere. She watched it. Her face drained of color. Not because she regretted what she'd done, because she realized other people had seen it. Who posted this? I don't know. One of the customers, probably. "Get it taken down." "I can't get it taken down, Karen. It's on Twitter. It's on TikTok. It's everywhere." Karen stared at the screen. The comment count was climbing in real time. She refreshed. 500 new comments in 30 seconds. Most of them included her name. Someone had already identified the branch location. Someone else had found her LinkedIn profile and was sharing screenshots. "This is ridiculous," she said. Her voice was thinner now. "I was doing my job." "Karen, people are saying this is racial profiling. I don't care what people are saying. I protected this bank from a fraudulent deposit. That's my job. If people want to make it about race, that's their problem, not mine." She closed her office door. All the way this time. But the door didn't stop anything. The video kept spreading. A reporter from WSB-TV called the bank's main line. Karen declined. Another reporter called. Then a producer from a podcast called Accountability Now left a voicemail requesting comment. A journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution emailed the branch's general inbox. Karen's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Why are you trending on Twitter?" She didn't respond. At 11:45, her desk phone rang. The caller ID read, "Heritage First, Corporate." "Karen Whitfield? This is Diane from Corporate Communications. We need you to not speak to any media. Do not post on social media. Do not make any statements of any kind. Do you understand?" "I was following protocol." "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Someone from legal will be in contact with you shortly. Do not leave the branch." The line went dead. Karen sat in her chair. The yogurt parfait was melting on her desk. The spreadsheet was still open. The afternoon light had shifted across the wall, stretching the shadow of the window blinds into long, thin bars across her face. Outside, in the parking lot, Miles Carter was leaning against his Explorer, reading a book. A paperback copy of James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. He had found it in the glove compartment weeks ago. He hadn't planned on reading it today, but the universe had a sense of timing. His phone buzzed. A text from Raymond. 15 minutes out. Victor has the full board briefed. Legal is ready. It's happening. Miles closed the book, folded the corner of the page, set it on the passenger seat. He looked at the front doors of Heritage First Bank. The same doors he had been shoved through 2 hours ago. The same glass that had reflected his back as Derek pushed him onto the sidewalk. He straightened his flannel. He didn't change his clothes. He didn't need to. The truth was about to walk back inside that building, and it was wearing the same worn shoes. At 12:07 p.m., 3 black SUVs pulled into the Heritage First parking lot and parked in a row near the entrance. The engines cut. Doors opened in sequence. Raymond Bennett stepped out first. Dark suit, no tie, jaw set like concrete. He was 55 years old, CFO of Ascend Capital Partners, and a founding board member of Heritage First Bank. He had known Miles Carter for 28 years. They had built their first company in a garage in College Park with a dial-up modem and a shared credit card. When Raymond said, "We'll fix this," it wasn't a figure of speech. It was a promise delivered with the weight of 3 decades. Behind him came 2 attorneys from Heritage First's legal division. Sharp suits, leather briefcases, expressions that could cut glass. And then Victor Dawson. Victor was the chairman of Heritage First Bank's board of directors. 61 years old, silver hair cropped close. A man who moved slowly because he never needed to rush. He had spent 30 years in banking regulation before taking the chairman's seat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When Victor walked into a room, the room adjusted. Miles met them on the sidewalk. Raymond shook his hand and held it for an extra second. Victor nodded once. No small talk, no pleasantries. They all knew why they were here. The 5 of them walked through the front doors of Heritage First Bank. The lobby went quiet. Brittany Walsh looked up from her window. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She recognized Raymond Bennett from the annual compliance video that played during training. She had never seen him in person. She had certainly never seen him walk into her branch flanked by lawyers. Todd Emerson, the loan officer, stood up from his desk. He didn't know who these men were, but he knew what authority looked like when it entered a building. He buttoned his jacket. Derek, the security guard, took 1 step forward, then stopped. Something in the air told him this was not a situation he was supposed to manage. Victor spoke first. His voice filled the lobby without effort. "I need to see your branch manager. Now." Brittany's hand reached for the phone. Her voice cracked. "Karen? There are people here. From corporate, I think. You need to come out." 12 seconds later, Karen Whitfield emerged from her office. She had fixed her hair. She had straightened her blazer. She was smiling. The automatic smile of a middle manager who assumes any corporate visit is a routine check-in, a chance to impress. "Good afternoon," she said, extending her hand to Victor. "Welcome to Heritage First. I'm Karen Whitfield, branch manager. What can I—" "Mrs. Whitfield." Victor did not take her hand. "Do you know who funds this branch?" The smile cracked. Not much, just a flicker at the edges. "I'm sorry?" "The capital that built this building. The investment that pays your salary, your staff, your security." He gestured toward Derek without looking at him. "Do you know where it comes from?" Karen's hand dropped to her side. The bank's investors, I assume. The board." "One investor." Raymond stepped forward. He opened a tablet and turned the screen toward her. On it was a photograph of Miles Carter. Not the man in the flannel standing 3 feet behind Raymond, but the Miles Carter from a Forbes profile. Suit, office, skyline behind him. The headline read, "Miles Carter, Ascend Capital founder, top 50 black billionaires in America." Raymond swiped. A financial summary appeared. $30 million, initial investment. 8 years of sustained funding. quarterly capital injections that kept the branch solvent during its first 3 years when no one thought it would survive. This man, Raymond said, his voice low and precise, wrote every check that built what you call your branch. Karen's eyes moved from the screen to Raymond, from Raymond to Victor, from Victor to the man standing behind them in the worn flannel shirt and old running shoes. Miles Carter. The same man she had called a scammer. The same man whose check she had torn into pieces. The same man she had ordered dragged out of the building by security. He was standing in her lobby again. Same clothes, same posture, same calm. The blood left Karen's face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her knees buckled just slightly, enough that she reached for the edge of the teller counter to steady herself. The lobby was frozen. Brittany had both hands flat on the counter. Todd was standing behind his desk with his mouth open. Derek had backed up against the wall near the entrance, arms at his sides, staring at the floor. No one moved. Miles looked at Karen. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't... Victor raised one hand. Not yet, Mrs. Whitfield. Not yet. Victor Dawson didn't sit down. He stood in the center of the lobby with his hands clasped behind his back, like a man about to deliver a verdict, which is exactly what he was. Mrs. Whitfield, at approximately 9:15 this morning, a customer entered this branch with a legitimate cashier's check for $20 million. That check was drawn on Ascend Capital Partners, an account this bank has held for 8 years. You did not verify the check. You did not contact the issuing institution. You did not follow any standard authentication protocol. Karen's mouth opened. Victor continued. Instead, you publicly insulted the customer. You used language that multiple witnesses have described as racially charged. You physically destroyed a valid financial instrument worth $20 million, and you ordered security to remove the customer from the premises by force. He paused. The pause was surgical. That customer is Miles Carter. He is the founder and sole principal of Ascend Capital Partners. He is also the individual who provided the $30 million investment that built this branch 8 years ago. Every desk in this building, every computer, every paycheck you have ever received from Heritage First, including yours, exists because of the man you threw out this morning. Karen's hand was shaking. She grabbed the edge of the counter again. Her pearl earring caught the fluorescent light as her head dropped forward. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know who he was. That's the problem, Mrs. Whitfield. Victor's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It shouldn't have mattered who he was. One of the attorneys stepped forward and placed a single sheet of paper on the counter. A suspension notice. Effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation into discriminatory conduct, destruction of financial instruments, and violations of Heritage First's Code of Ethics. Your badge, Victor said. Karen's fingers fumbled at the lanyard around her neck. She pulled it over her head and set it on the counter next to the suspension notice. Her hands were trembling so badly the badge slid across the surface and nearly fell off the edge. You will not return to this branch until the investigation is concluded. You will not contact any staff member. You will not speak to media. An attorney from our legal division will contact you within 48 hours. Karen nodded. She couldn't look at Miles. She couldn't look at anyone. Victor turned to Derek. The security guard was pressed against the wall, his face gray. Mr. Derek Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, 2 hours ago, you physically removed a customer from this building on the instruction of your manager. Is that correct? Derek swallowed. Yes, sir. She told me to... I'm not asking what she told you. I'm asking what you did. Derek looked at the floor. I grabbed his arm. I walked him to the door. I pushed the door open and guided him out. Guided. Victor let the word hang in the air for 3 seconds. You are also suspended pending investigation. Please surrender your badge. Derek unclipped his badge from his belt. He set it on the counter next to Karen's. The 2 badges lay side by side. the manager and the guard, stripped in the same lobby where they had stripped a man of his dignity 4 hours earlier. Brittany Walsh stood at her window, white-knuckled, watching. She hadn't been asked to step forward yet, but she knew her turn was coming. She had made the call. She had handed Karen the check. She had seen everything and said almost nothing. One of the attorneys approached her. "Ms. Walsh, we'll need a written statement from you by end of business today. You are not suspended at this time, but you are relieved of duties for the remainder of the day." Brittany nodded. Her eyes were wet. Miles stood near the entrance through all of it. He hadn't said a word since walking back inside. He didn't gloat. He didn't point. He watched the way a man watches a house he built start to crumble. Not with satisfaction, but with a heavy, quiet grief. Raymond touched his shoulder. "You okay?" Miles didn't answer immediately. He was looking at the floor near the teller window. The marble tiles were clean now. Someone had swept up the check fragments earlier that morning. But Miles could still see where they had fallen. He could still hear the sound of Karen's fingers tearing the paper. "Pull every complaint filed at this branch in the last 3 years," Miles said quietly. "Every single one." Raymond nodded. "Already started." Karen Whitfield walked out through the front doors of Heritage First Bank at 12:41 p.m. She was escorted by Derek Sullivan, the same man who had escorted Miles out 4 hours earlier. The irony was not lost on a single person in that lobby. She didn't look back. The investigation started the next morning. Heritage First's internal compliance team arrived at the Campbellton Road branch at 8 a.m. with 2 rolling cases of equipment and a mandate from the board. Find everything. They found everything. Raymond Bennett had already pulled the complaint files overnight. 14 formal complaints had been lodged against Karen Whitfield in the 27 months she had managed the branch. 11 of those complaints came from black customers. 3 came from Hispanic customers. Every single one described the same pattern: dismissive language, excessive ID requirements, delayed service, and in 4 cases, outright refusal to process legitimate transactions. Not one of those complaints had been escalated. Not one had triggered a review. Karen had handled them herself. She had filed each one in a manila folder inside her desk drawer, marked "Resolved," "No action required," and moved on. The compliance team also pulled the branch's security camera footage from the morning of the incident. The video was clearer than Jamal Price's phone recording. It showed Karen tearing the check in high definition. It captured the audio of her saying, "You filthy people," through the overhead microphone. It showed Derek gripping Miles's arm hard enough to wrinkle the flannel. It showed Mrs. Gloria Hayes standing up and being told to sit down. The footage was forwarded to Heritage First's legal division, to the board, and, at Victor Dawson's instruction, to the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. By Wednesday evening, the story was national news. CNN ran a segment titled "Banking While Black: Billionaire Humiliated at His Own Bank." The anchor played the viral clip and the security footage side by side. A legal analyst broke down the potential violations: the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act's lending provisions, and Georgia state civil rights statutes. NBC followed with an interview. Not with Miles. He declined every request. They interviewed Mrs. Gloria Hayes instead. She sat in her living room in front of the rose bush visible through the window and told the story from the beginning. Her voice was steady. Her hands were folded in her lap. "He didn't raise his voice," she said. "Not once. And that woman tore his money up and threw the pieces at him like he was nothing. I've been banking at that branch for 6 years, and I'm telling you, she treated every black person who walked through that door like we didn't belong." The interview aired on Thursday night. By Friday morning, it had 12 million views. Attorney Diane Foster entered the picture on Thursday. She was a civil rights litigator out of Atlanta, sharp, relentless, and well known in legal circles for taking discrimination cases that other firms considered too complicated or too political. She had been watching the story unfold online. She reached out to Mrs. Hayes first, then to 3 other former customers who had filed complaints against Karen. Within a week, she represented all 14 complainants. Foster held a press conference on the steps of the Fulton County Courthouse. 13 of the 14 complainants stood behind her. The 14th, an 83-year-old man named Walter Reed, who had been refused a home equity loan by Karen despite having a credit score of 790, watched from home on his television because his knees wouldn't let him stand that long. What happened to Miles Carter is not an isolated incident, Foster said into a cluster of microphones. It is the result of a pattern of discriminatory conduct that Heritage First Bank allowed to continue unchecked for over 2 years. These 14 individuals were denied services, humiliated, and turned away from a financial institution that was specifically built to serve their community. That ends today. She filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Heritage First Bank and Karen Whitfield individually. The suit sought compensatory damages for each complainant, punitive damages, and a court-mandated overhaul of the bank's diversity and compliance training across all branches. Heritage First did not fight it. The board, led by Victor Dawson, issued a public statement within 48 hours. They acknowledged the failures. They did not use the word alleged. They called the conduct unacceptable, discriminatory, and a betrayal of the institution's founding mission. They announced Karen Whitfield's termination, effective immediately, with cause. They announced Derek Sullivan's termination for excessive use of physical force against a customer. They committed to a $30 million settlement fund for the 14 complainants and pledged to implement mandatory anti-discrimination training at every Heritage First location nationwide. Karen Whitfield was charged separately by the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. The charges included willful destruction of a financial instrument, discriminatory denial of banking services under Georgia Code Title 10, and filing false internal reports to conceal customer complaints. She faced up to 3 years in prison. The trial lasted 4 days. Karen's attorney argued she had acted within her discretion as branch manager and that her conduct, while aggressive, was not racially motivated. The prosecution presented the 14 complaints, the security footage, the Instagram post she had made that morning. Some days you just have to protect your space. #NotToday. And testimony from 3 former employees who described a workplace culture where black customers were routinely subjected to additional scrutiny that white customers were not. Brittany Walsh testified. She sat in the witness box with her hands clasped together and described what she had seen that morning. She described Karen's tone. She described the way Karen had mimicked Miles's voice to the staff afterward. She described the words Karen had used when Brittany asked if the check might be real. Men who carry $20 million checks don't dress like that. They don't drive cars like that. They don't look like that. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Karen Whitfield was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from employment in the financial services industry. The judge, a 64-year-old woman named Judge Patricia Coleman, added a statement from the bench. Ms. Whitfield, you were entrusted with a branch that was built specifically to serve a community that has been historically excluded from financial institutions. Instead of serving that community, you became the very barrier the institution was designed to remove. The court finds that deeply troubling. Karen stood in the courtroom with her hands at her sides. She did not cry. She did not apologize again. She stared at the table in front of her as though she could will herself somewhere else. Outside the courthouse, Diane Foster stood with her clients. Mrs. Gloria Hayes was in the front row, wearing a blue dress and holding a single white rose from her garden. Justice doesn't always come fast, Mrs. Hayes told a reporter, but today it came. 6 months after the trial, the Heritage First branch on Campbellton Road reopened under new management. The new branch manager was Allison Brooks, 43 years old, born and raised in southwest Atlanta, 4 blocks from the bank. She had spent 18 years in community banking. She knew every church within a 2-mile radius by name. She knew which families needed help with their first mortgage and which needed help keeping the one they had. On her first day, she taped a handwritten note to the inside of her office door. It read, "Every person who walks through that entrance deserves to be treated like they built this place, because someone who looks just like them did." Miles Carter attended the reopening. He stood in the back row, just like 8 years earlier. No speech, no ribbon cutting. Navy button-down. Raymond had insisted, but the same old running shoes. The branch looked different now. Not the marble or the glass. Those were the same, but the air was different. The first teller greeted every customer by name. A financial literacy poster hung in the waiting area, bright yellow, hand-designed by local high school students. A small plaque near the entrance read, "This branch was established through the generosity of the Carter Community Fund." Miles had insisted the plaque not include his first name. The work mattered more than the man. The Carter Community Fund launched 3 months after the incident. $50 million. Zero-interest microloans, financial literacy education, and banking access for underserved Black communities across Georgia. Within its first quarter, the fund approved 212 loans. A barbershop on Cascade Road. A daycare center in Bankhead. A catering company run by a woman who had been denied a business loan by 4 banks, including, once, by Karen Whitfield. Brittany Walsh left Heritage First 2 months after the trial. She submitted her resignation on a Monday morning and drove home in silence. 3 weeks later, she enrolled in a social work program at Georgia State. She told a classmate during orientation that she had spent 2 years watching something wrong happen and pretending it was normal. She didn't want to pretend anymore. Derek Sullivan took a job at a warehouse in Stockbridge. He didn't talk about what happened. When a coworker asked if he was the guard from the viral video, he said no. He was lying, and they both knew it. Mrs. Gloria Hayes became the Carter Community Fund's first community ambassador. She sat at folding tables in church basements, helping people fill out loan applications and open their first savings accounts. She carried a photograph in her purse, a still frame from the security footage, showing her standing up while everyone else sat. She never showed it to anyone. She didn't need to. Miles continued to live in the 3-bedroom house in Decatur. The swing set was gone. In its place, he had planted a small garden. Tomatoes, basil, bell peppers. Eleanor would have liked that. She always said the backyard needed something alive. He still drove the Explorer, still ate at the diner on Ponce de Leon. The waitress still called him baby. She still didn't ask what he did for a living. Some mornings, he sat on the back porch with his coffee and thought about that Tuesday. Not the humiliation, not the torn check. He thought about Mrs. Hayes standing up when no one else would. A 71-year-old woman with a thin voice and steady hands who looked at injustice and said that wasn't right when the rest of the room chose silence. That, he decided, was worth more than $20 million. Real talk. Miles could have walked away. He built that bank, funded it, owed it nothing. But he stayed and made it better. And Mrs. Hayes? Nobody asked her to stand up. She just did. That's the kind of quiet courage that changes everything. What would you have done if you were standing in that bank lobby? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have been the one to stand up? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button, because stories like this need to be told.